What if everything we have been taught about the dawn of human civilization is fundamentally wrong? For centuries, the established narrative has presented history as a linear progression, a slow climb from primitive simplicity to modern complexity. Textbooks tell a story of hunter-gatherers who around 12,000 years ago suddenly and miraculously invented agriculture in the Fertile Crescent. This agricultural revolution, we are told, was the catalyst that allowed for settled life, the growth of villages, and eventually, the rise of the first cities and monumental architecture. This timeline, with Sumer in Mesopotamia and the dynasties of ancient Egypt as its crowning achievements, has been the unquestioned bedrock of our understanding of the human past. But what if this story is not only incomplete, but also profoundly incorrect? This conventional model places the construction of the first grand temples and the development of sophisticated social structures firmly after the invention of farming. Cities like Uruk in Mesopotamia, emerging around 4000 BCE, are celebrated as humanity's first urban centers, followed by the magnificent pyramids of Giza around 3000 BCE. The sequence has always been clear. First, we secure our food supply, then we build complex societies. It is a logical, neat, and comforting progression that suggests humanity's path was a steady, predictable march forward. Leading archaeological institutions have built entire careers and frameworks upon this chronological foundation. However, scattered across the globe, a series of enigmatic discoveries have begun to emerge, discoveries that directly challenge this tidy sequence. These are not minor corrections to the historical record, but profound anomalies that suggest a forgotten chapter of human achievement. The first substantial crack in this paradigm appeared in southeastern Turkey, on a barren limestone hilltop known as Göbekli Tepe. Here, in the mid-1990s, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating a site that would utterly rewrite the prehistoric timeline. Radiocarbon dating revealed an almost unbelievable age for this complex, 11,600 years old. This places its construction squarely in the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, a time when humanity was supposedly still composed of nomadic hunter-gatherers. Yet, Göbekli Tepe is not a simple campsite. It is a sprawling temple complex of intricately carved T-shaped pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in precise circular formations. This architectural and artistic sophistication, appearing before the widespread adoption of agriculture, pottery, or even the wheel, defies all conventional explanations of cultural development. The implications of Göbekli Tepe are staggering and force a complete re-evaluation of the capabilities of pre-agricultural peoples. The builders of this site were not simple bands of foragers struggling for survival. They were organized, highly motivated, and possessed a complex symbolic and spiritual worldview. To quarry, transport, and erect these massive stones would have required a level of social organization and collective labor previously thought impossible for this era. The pillars are adorned with masterful reliefs of abstract symbols and a menagerie of animals, including foxes, snakes, boars, and cranes, suggesting a rich mythology. According to the conventional timeline, such a project should be impossible, suggesting that the impulse to build monumental sacred sites may have actually been a primary driver for the development of agriculture, not the other way around. Could it be that religion and culture, not subsistence, were the true pillars upon which civilization was first built? Across an ocean and thousands of years, a similarly perplexing mystery unfolds in the steamy lowlands of the Gulf Coast of Mexico. Here, a culture we call the Olmec emerged with astonishing suddenness around 1600 BCE, long before the more famous Maya or Aztec civilizations. The Olmec are widely considered the founders of Mesoamerica, credited with developing the first writing system, the first ball courts, and the foundations of the region's complex cosmology. Yet their origins are shrouded in mystery, as if they appeared fully formed with no clear developmental precursors in the archaeological record. Who were these people, and how did they acquire such advanced knowledge in what seems to be a relative vacuum of cultural development? The question of their origins remains one of the most contentious and fascinating puzzles in American archaeology. The most famous and baffling legacies of the Olmec are their 17 colossal basalt heads, each one a unique masterpiece of ancient sculpture. These monumental carvings, weighing up to 40 tons and standing over 3 meters tall, depict individualized faces with flat noses, thick lips, and almond-shaped eyes. The basalt for these heads was quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, a difficult journey of over 100 kilometers through swamps and dense jungle to the Olmec heartland of San Lorenzo and La Venta. This logistical achievement implies a highly centralized and powerful society capable of commanding immense labor and resources. The sheer scale and technical proficiency of these works challenge the notion of the Olmec as a fledgling society, pointing to a level of social complexity that seems to have emerged from nowhere. The controversial nature of the Olmec extends beyond their enigmatic rise to the very features carved into their monuments. Some researchers and independent scholars have pointed out that the head's facial characteristics appear distinctly un-Mongoloid, sometimes resembling African or even, more speculatively, ancient Eurasian peoples. This observation has fueled a host of alternative theories, including the possibility of transoceanic contact long before the age of European exploration. While mainstream academia largely dismisses these ideas, attributing the features to artistic stylization or a yet undiscovered local population, the resemblance is undeniably striking. How did a supposedly isolated civilization in the Americas produce art that so closely resembles people from a continent and ocean away? The question lingers, a persistent whisper against the silence of the accepted historical narrative. A tantalizing clue that might connect these disparate cultures can be found in their shared reverence for the stars. At Göbekli Tepe, researchers like Graham Hancock and Dr. Martin Sweatman have proposed that the arrangement of the pillars and the specific animals carved upon them function as a prehistoric star map. Their theory suggests the site commemorates a catastrophic comet impact around 10,950 BCE, a date encoded in the constellations depicted on the stones. Meanwhile, in Mesoamerica, the Olmec and their successors were master astronomers, with their entire worldview, mythology, and legendary calendar systems deeply intertwined with celestial cycles, particularly the movements of Venus and the Sun. Both cultures, separated by vast oceans and millennia, seem to look to the heavens for their origins, their gods, and their destiny. This cosmic connection leads us to the central hypothesis of our investigation, the idea of a forbidden blueprint. Could it be that the builders of Göbekli Tepe and the sculptors of the Olmec heads were not innovators working in isolation, but inheritors of a much older global system of knowledge? This blueprint may not have been a physical map etched on parchment, but a celestial one, a memory of an ancient astronomical science passed down through countless generations. It would be a science that guided the placement of sacred sites, the structure of societies, and the very myths that define the human relationship to the cosmos. This shared celestial heritage could explain the recurring themes of advanced engineering and sophisticated astronomy that appear at the dawn of civilizations worldwide. It is a radical idea, but one that offers a potential unifying thread to these global mysteries. The stakes of this question could not be higher, for if a blueprint was indeed shared, it forces a radical rethinking of our entire past. It would mean that civilizations did not arise independently in isolated pockets, but were, perhaps, nodes in a long-forgotten global network of knowledge. This challenges the core of our understanding of prehistory, suggesting a lost chapter of human history, one that speaks of incredible achievements, global connections, and a forgotten legacy that has been hidden in plain sight. What else did these ancient builders know that we have forgotten? As we begin to decode their messages left in stone, we may find that the blueprint they left behind is not just a map of the stars, but a map to our own forgotten origins. Perched atop a limestone ridge in southeastern Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, the site known as Göbekli Tepe, or quote, one stands as a profound anomaly in the human story. Its construction, dated to an astonishing 11,600 years ago, predates Stonehenge by 7,000 years and the pyramids of Giza by 6,000. This was a time when, according to all archaeological evidence, humanity existed in small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers, living a precarious existence. Yet here, on a barren hilltop, these prehistoric peoples erected a monumental complex of megalithic scale and sophistication. Göbekli Tepe is not a dwelling. It is undeniably a temple, the world's oldest known temple built by a people we thought incapable of such a feat. The architecture of Göbekli Tepe is centered around massive T-shaped limestone pillars, many exceeding 6 meters in height and weighing up to 20 tons. These monoliths were quarried from a nearby limestone outcrop using only stone tools, a feat of engineering that boggles the modern mind. The pillars are arranged in a series of concentric circular enclosures, with 2 especially massive central pillars surrounded by a circle of slightly smaller ones. What makes these stones even more enigmatic is that many are finely carved with reliefs of abstract symbols and a staggering array of animals. They stand like a silent, petrified congregation of giants, gathered for a ritual that has been forgotten for millennia. The iconography adorning the pillars provides a tantalizing glimpse into the minds of their creators. A menagerie of creatures is depicted in high relief, including foxes, snakes, boars, wild boars, cranes, vultures, scorpions, and bulls. Some of these carvings are incredibly dynamic, showing animals in motion or in violent confrontation, suggesting complex narratives or mythological scenes. According to the late Dr. Klaus Schmidt, the site's lead excavator, Göbekli Tepe was likely a pilgrimage center for nomadic tribes from a wide region. The recurring animal symbols may represent clan totems, spiritual guardians, or constellations in a prehistoric zodiac, a star map frozen in stone. The sheer logistics of constructing Göbekli Tepe in the pre-pottery Neolithic A period presents a seemingly impossible challenge. Without metal tools to cut the stone, without the wheel to transport it, and without pack animals or settled communities to provide a large labor force, how was this accomplished? Archaeologists estimate that the quarrying, shaping, and erecting of a single 20-ton pillar would have required the coordinated effort of hundreds of individuals. This implies a level of social organization, planning, and collective will previously believed impossible for hunter-gatherer societies. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not primitive cavemen. They were engineers, artists, and architects working with a shared, grand vision. Perhaps the most revolutionary implication of Göbekli Tepe is its challenge to the traditional model of civilization's birth. The standard theory posits that agriculture leads to food surplus, which allows for settled villages, which in turn leads to specialized labor, social hierarchies, and finally, organized religion. Göbekli Tepe turns this sequence on its head. Here, monumental sacred architecture appears first, built by people who had not yet domesticated plants or animals. This has led some researchers to propose a radical new theory. The impulse to build and maintain this great temple was the catalyst for the invention of agriculture. It was not the need for bread that created the temple, but the need to feed the builders and worshippers at the temple that may have led to the sowing of the first seeds. Adding to its profound mystery is the fact that after hundreds of years of use, the entire Göbekli Tepe complex was intentionally buried. Around 8000 BCE, the creators filled every enclosure with hundreds of tons of soil and debris, deliberately entombing their magnificent creation. This was not a gradual ruin covered by natural sediment. It was a meticulous, planned act of decommissioning. Why would a culture invest such immense effort to build a site only to hide it from the world so completely? Was it a ritual act to lay a sacred place to rest? Or was it an attempt to preserve its knowledge from a coming catastrophe, a final message to the future? The T-shaped pillars themselves are rich with symbolic meaning that may echo through later cultures. The shape, with its narrow neck and wide top, has been interpreted by some scholars as a stylized human form, with the side reliefs representing arms and hands. Other researchers connect the T-shape to the ancient and nearly universal symbol of the world tree, or the axis mundi. This central pillar is a mythological concept representing a connection between the heavens, the earthly world, and the underworld. Could Göbekli Tepe be a physical representation of this cosmic axis, a place where the three realms met and humanity could commune with the divine? Göbekli Tepe is not a complete anomaly, but rather the most magnificent example of a broader cultural phenomenon flourishing in prehistoric Anatolia. In recent years, archaeologists have discovered other, smaller sites in the region that share similar characteristics, such as Karahan Tepe, Sefer Tepe, and Sayburk. These lesser-known locations also feature T-shaped pillars, animal carvings, and similar architectural layouts, suggesting a widespread Stone Age spiritual landscape. This network of interconnected sacred sites points to a sophisticated and widespread culture that existed in the shadows of history, long before the rise of Mesopotamia or Egypt. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not alone. The construction of Göbekli Tepe coincides with a period of dramatic and turbulent climate change known as the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to glacial conditions that disrupted the world. Some researchers, like geologist Robert Schoch, have even suggested that the site shows signs of water erosion, implying it could be even older than conventionally dated. More provocatively, theories proposed by figures like Graham Hancock connect the site's symbolism to a cataclysmic comet impact around 10,950 BCE, an event that may have ended the Younger Dryas. Could Göbekli Tepe be a monument to this catastrophe, a warning from the few who survived, or a repository of knowledge from a lost antediluvian world? Ultimately, the identity of the Göbekli Tepe builders remains an enigma. We have found no permanent dwellings, no trash heaps, no graves, no trace of the daily lives of the people who built this extraordinary place. They appear to be a ghost civilization, defined solely by their monumental spiritual achievement. They possessed an advanced understanding of stonework, social organization, and symbolic thought, yet they left behind no evidence of the usual trappings of civilization. Who were these people, and what was the nature of the belief system that could compel them to undertake such a Herculean task with only the most primitive tools? Göbekli Tepe forces us to confront the possibility that our modern, materialist definition of progress is fundamentally flawed. It suggests that the human capacity for abstract thought, complex symbolism, and collective spiritual expression may be far more ancient than we have ever imagined. This incredible site stands as a testament to the idea that the journey towards civilization may have been driven not solely by the stomach, but by the soul. It is the first physical evidence of a human yearning for meaning and connection to the cosmos that predates everything we thought we knew. The world's first temple is not just an archaeological discovery. It is a profound revelation about the deep roots of the human spirit. The world's first temple forces a confrontational question not about belief, but about capability. How could people, whom we classify as simple hunter-gatherers, orchestrate a construction project of such monumental complexity? The pillars of Göbekli Tepe, some weighing up to 20 tons, were not just found and placed. They were quarried, shaped, transported, and erected with a precision that seems to defy their technological context. This engineering mystery is in many ways more profound than the site's symbolic meaning, as it directly challenges our fundamental understanding of human progress. We must move from the sacred purpose of the site to the profane, yet staggering, reality of how it was built. The journey of each pillar began in a limestone quarry located approximately 500 meters from the main enclosures. Archaeologists have identified the exact spot where the megaliths were born, as several pillars in various stages of completion still remain attached to the bedrock. The ancient workers, using only stone hammers likely made from harder igneous rock like basalt, would have painstakingly carved deep grooves around the desired pillar shape. They then probably used wooden levers and wedges, swollen with water to exert immense pressure, to crack the massive stone block free from the living rock. This initial step alone required not just brute force, but a sophisticated understanding of geology, fracture mechanics, and planning. Once liberated, a 10 or 20-ton block of limestone had to be moved across uneven terrain to the temple hill. The most widely accepted theory involves a system of massive wooden sledges or cradles upon which the pillar was lashed. Teams of hundreds of workers would then pull these sledges using thick ropes, with the effort potentially multiplied by the use of wooden rollers placed in front of the sledge. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that this method is feasible, but it demands a perfectly coordinated labor force and a prepared transport route. The builders of Göbekli Tepe would have needed to clear a path, level the ground, and likely lubricate the runners with water or animal fat to reduce the immense friction. The toolkit available to these prehistoric engineers was astonishingly primitive, yet remarkably effective for this specific task. For the fine carving of the intricate reliefs, they used sharp-edged flint or obsidian blades, which could be knapped to a razor's edge. However, for the heavy quarrying and shaping, they relied on heavier tools. Large, fist-sized stone hammers for bashing the rock, and antler or bone picks for gouging and scraping. The very existence of the site proves that these simple tools, in the hands of skilled artisans, were more than sufficient to work limestone. This efficiency suggests a long tradition of stoneworking, a mastery passed down through generations that has left no other trace. The logistics of organizing such a workforce present perhaps the greatest puzzle of all. This was not a small tribe undertaking a seasonal task. This was a massive, multi-year, or even multi-generational project requiring project management. There had to be architects who designed the circular layouts, foremen who directed the quarry crews, and logisticians who ensured everyone was fed and watered. Such a complex hierarchical structure, with specialized roles and the command chain, is a hallmark of a settled agricultural society. The existence of this organization at Göbekli Tepe, built by people who had not yet invented farming, turns our societal models upside down. The erection of the pillars is another feat of ingenuity that has been the subject of much debate. Without cranes or pulleys, how does one lift a 20-ton monolith into a vertical position? The prevailing theory involves a combination of a large, prepared post hole and a system of levers and pivots. Workers would likely have used a series of A-frame wooden supports, gradually raising the pillar by inserting wooden wedges and shims underneath its base as they levered it upwards. The T-shape of the pillars themselves may have been a key part of the process, allowing for the attachment of a temporary wooden crossbar to which ropes could be tied for pulling from multiple angles. An alternative and more elegant theory proposed by some modern engineers suggests a different technique. They propose the builders may have used a single massive wooden fulcrum or rocking cradle to walk the heavy pillars into place. By pivoting the stone back and forth over a central point, a smaller, more coordinated team could gradually maneuver the pillar into its socket with surprising efficiency. This method would reduce the number of laborers needed and showcase a deeper understanding of physics and leverage than we typically credit to people of this era. It remains a compelling possibility, though one that is difficult to prove definitively. To put the Göbekli Tepe achievement in perspective, it is essential to compare it to the great construction projects of later, advanced civilizations. The ancient Egyptians, who built the pyramids around 4,500 years ago, had significant technological advantages. They possessed copper chisels and saws, the wheel, domesticated animals to pull sledges, and a well-established state-level bureaucracy to organize and feed a massive workforce. When viewed in this light, the Göbekli Tepe builders, who accomplished a similar feat of megalithic transport and erection 7,000 years earlier, appear to be even more resourceful and innovative. Beyond the sheer scale, the precision and artistry of the construction are equally astounding. The pillars are not rough, crudely shaped blocks. They are dressed with relatively flat surfaces and, in some cases, polished to a smooth finish. The intricate animal reliefs are carved with deep, confident lines, demonstrating a mastery of three-dimensional form. This level of craftsmanship implies a highly developed aesthetic sense and generations of accumulated technical knowledge. These were not amateurs learning on the job. They were seasoned professionals who had perfected their art over a long period, a period for which we have no other archaeological evidence. One of the most frustrating aspects for researchers is the complete absence of the builder's settlement. A project of this scale would have required a large, semi-permanent base camp to house and support the workers. Archaeologists have conducted extensive geophysical surveys around the site, searching for the remains of a large village or town. What they have found instead are only the faint traces of small, temporary structures, suggesting seasonal use. This stark absence of a supporting city deepens the mystery, reinforcing the image of a, quote, 10 that appeared, built a masterpiece, and then vanished back into the landscape. The logistical problem of feeding the workforce is immense and directly ties into the debate over the origins of agriculture. A labor force of several hundred people would require tons of food annually. In a purely foraging economy, this would mean denuding the landscape for miles around. This has led some researchers, including the original excavator, Dr. Klaus Schmidt, to propose the, quote, 11 hypothesis. The relentless, year-round need to feed the builders and ritual specialists at Göbekli Tepe may have been the very catalyst that forced these people to domesticate wild grasses, essentially inventing agriculture out of necessity. The engineering of the site also incorporates a sophisticated understanding of its environment and the cosmos. The enclosures are not randomly scattered, but are built into the hillside with a precise orientation. Some researchers have identified alignments with the rising and setting points of the sun at the solstices, as well as potential stellar alignments. This would mean the planners were not just architects and engineers, but also careful astronomers. They were capable of tracking celestial bodies over decades to encode their movements into the very fabric of their sacred architecture. The construction was not a single event, but a long-term commitment. Archaeological strata show that Göbekli Tepe was built in phases over hundreds, if not thousands of years. Older circular enclosures were intentionally buried and new ones built on top of them. This implies a continuous, intergenerational transmission of knowledge, purpose, and architectural plans. A blueprint existed in the minds of the builders, a design concept so powerful that it was faithfully passed down and expanded upon throughout the centuries, long before the invention of writing. Modern engineers who have studied Göbekli Tepe are consistently amazed by the logistical chain required for its creation. According to their analyses, the project would necessitate roles equivalent to modern-day quarry managers, structural engineers, site supervisors, and supply chain coordinators. The ability to communicate complex plans, manage a large and diverse workforce, and solve unforeseen engineering problems on the fly indicates a cognitive capacity that rivals our own. The technical execution of Göbekli Tepe is a silent testament to a level of intellectual sophistication that we have been reluctant to grant to our distant ancestors. Ultimately, the impossible engineering of Göbekli Tepe serves as a powerful refutation of the linear, simplistic view of human history. It demonstrates that monumental architecture, complex social organization, and advanced engineering can precede, and perhaps even precipitate, the development of agriculture and urban settlement. The builders of this Anatolian hilltop were not primitive savages taking their first steps towards civilization. They were already there. They were the inheritors of a lost legacy of knowledge and skill, and their stone cathedral stands as the ultimate proof that the past is far more complex and far more wondrous than we have ever dared to imagine. Beyond the sheer physical accomplishment of its construction, the true enigma of Göbekli Tepe lies in the breathtaking artistry that adorns its monolithic pillars. The surfaces are alive with a menagerie of creatures, carved in deep relief with a skill that seems to defy their epoch. Foxes, snakes, boars, bulls, cranes, and vultures are depicted with an anatomical precision and a dynamic energy that is both beautiful and unnerving. These are not crude doodles, but the work of master artisans, each figure imbued with a sense of purpose and meaning. To understand the minds of the builders, we must first attempt to decode the language of these stone carvings, a language inscribed over 11,000 years ago. Initial interpretations by archaeologists leaned heavily on the assumption that the carvings represented the natural world of the hunter-gatherers. Perhaps they were totems, representing the spirit of different clans or the most important animals in their environment. Some scholars suggested the scenes depicted hunting magic, rituals designed to ensure a successful hunt or to appease the spirits of the wild. The abundance of predatory birds like vultures and eagles, often shown in aggressive poses, hinted at a sky-centric mythology or a fascination with death and the afterlife. While these theories are logical and grounded in known tribal practices, they struggle to explain the specific, repetitive arrangements of the animals. A revolutionary new perspective began to emerge when researchers stopped looking at the animals in isolation and started analyzing their positions relative to one another. The patterns, they argued, were not random but deliberately structured, mirroring a celestial map projected onto the Earth. This paradigm shift proposed that the pillars of Göbekli Tepe were not merely decorated with animals, but were actually a three-dimensional representation of the night sky. This astronomical theory suggests that the builders possessed a sophisticated cosmology, one that they deemed so important they immortalized in tons of stone. According to proponents of this theory, specific pillars correspond to specific constellations familiar to us today. The boar, a recurring motif, is thought to represent the constellation of Orion, a prominent winter star group. A large fox or dog-like figure aligns with the position of Canis Major, containing the brightest star in the sky, Sirius. The serpents and snakes, carved with undulating bodies, correspond to the long, winding constellation of Hydra, the water snake. This systematic correspondence across multiple pillars strengthens the argument for a deliberate, site-wide star map. The linchpin of this entire astronomical interpretation is Pillar 43, a stone so intricately carved it has been dubbed the, quote, 12, quote, 13 bags, quote, 14 buckets, quote, 15 T, quote, 16 forbidden blueprint, quote, 17. Remarkably similar serpentine deities, often associated with wisdom and creation, can be found in ancient Chinese, Hindu, and even Egyptian mythology, raising questions about a possible common origin or diffusion. These parallels, woven into the very fabric of these ancient belief systems, suggest that stories, like people, may have once crossed the vast oceans. The skeptics, however, present a powerful counterargument rooted in the principle of independent invention. Mainstream archaeologists argue that humans facing similar environmental and social challenges will naturally develop similar solutions and narratives, a concept known as convergent or parallel evolution. They point out that the flood myth could simply be a metaphorical response to the real-world experience of catastrophic river flooding, which occurred in both Mesopotamia and Mesoamerica. Likewise, the feathered serpent could be a composite symbol born from observing snakes and large colorful birds, a logical combination in regions rich with such fauna. The primary challenge for the transoceanic contact theory remains the stark lack of definitive, unambiguous Old World artifacts, such as specific metal tools, distinct pottery styles, or written inscriptions in pre-Columbian archaeological sites. Without a quote 18 artifact, the theories of shared knowledge remain in the realm of compelling circumstantial evidence, unable to fully overcome the burden of proof demanded by mainstream science. Yet, to dismiss the evidence entirely may be to underestimate the ingenuity and resilience of ancient seafarers. The notion that early humans were incapable of long-distance ocean travel is increasingly being challenged by archaeological discoveries and experimental voyages. The ancient Polynesians, for example, were master navigators who traversed thousands of miles of open ocean in sophisticated double-hulled canoes, guided only by the stars, winds, and ocean swells. Their colonization of the vast Pacific Triangle, from Hawaii to New Zealand, is one of humanity's greatest maritime achievements. Thor Heyerdahl's 1947 Kon-Tiki expedition demonstrated that a primitive balsa wood raft could successfully navigate the currents from South America to the Polynesian islands, proving that such a voyage was physically possible. These capabilities, combined with an intricate knowledge of star patterns potentially inherited from a culture like the one at Göbekli Tepe, make the idea of deliberate, long-distance exploration far less fantastical. The motivation for such perilous journeys may have been multifaceted, ranging from simple exploration and curiosity to the pursuit of valuable trade goods like jade, obsidian, or exotic feathers. However, a more urgent and profound motivation can be tied back to the very cataclysm possibly memorialized at Göbekli Tepe. If a comet impact indeed triggered the devastating Younger Dryas mini-ice age around 10,800 BCE, it would have caused unimaginable ecological collapse and societal disruption across the Northern Hemisphere. It is plausible that survivors from these devastated regions, possessing advanced knowledge of astronomy and navigation, set out across the seas in search of new, habitable lands. This quote 19 frames transoceanic contact not as casual trade, but as a desperate migration of refugees carrying the fragmented memories of a lost world. The quote 20 to new continents. This theory suggests that the survivors of this ancient cataclysm would have arrived in the Americas not as conquerors, but as bearers of knowledge, influencing the nascent cultures they encountered. They might have shared their astronomical insights, their engineering principles, and their cosmological myths, which then merged with local traditions to form the foundations of new civilizations. The sudden emergence of complex societies like the Olmec in Mesoamerica, seemingly without a long period of gradual development, could be explained by this infusion of outside knowledge. The Olmec, often called the quote 21 of Mesoamerica, appeared around 1600 BCE with a fully formed set of artistic, architectural, and religious concepts that have long puzzled archaeologists. Perhaps the answer to their sudden rise lies not in a vacuum, but in a connection to an older, now forgotten, global network. As we turn our gaze from the Anatolian plateau to the humid lowlands of the Gulf Coast of Mexico, we begin to see tantalizing physical artifacts that may represent the ultimate proof of this ancient connection. The most enigmatic of these are the colossal basalt heads carved by the Olmec civilization. Weighing dozens of tons each, these magnificent sculptures depict individuals with distinctly African features, including broad noses, fleshy lips, and a pronounced jawline. The sheer logistical challenge of quarrying, transporting, and carving these massive monoliths without metal tools or beasts of burden is a testament to the Olmec's engineering prowess. But it is their very appearance that has ignited a firestorm of controversy, for they seem to bear an uncanny resemblance to the people of a continent that, according to mainstream history, they should have had no contact with whatsoever. Proponents of the transoceanic contact theory point to the Olmec heads as the most direct and powerful evidence of an ancient African presence in the Americas. They argue that these are not stylized or symbolic representations, but startlingly realistic portraits of specific individuals, perhaps leaders or kings, who arrived from across the Atlantic. The facial features are so specific and consistent across the 17 known heads that they defy easy explanation as a mere artistic convention. This theory proposes that a group of Africans, possibly from the Nubian or Mande cultures of West Africa, may have crossed the Atlantic around 3,000 years ago, bringing with them advanced knowledge that helped to spark the rise of the Olmec civilization. These visitors would have been remembered and immortalized in stone, their faces becoming a permanent and forbidden record of a forgotten journey to the New World. Mainstream archaeologists, predictably, offer a different explanation, one rooted in the context of the local environment and culture. They argue that the features depicted on the Olmec heads, while perhaps appearing African to a modern observer, are actually representative of the local indigenous population, or perhaps a combination of human and jaguar characteristics within the Olmec's own mythological framework. They note that the fleshy features could simply be an idealized form of portraiture common in that era, and that the correlation to African phenotypes is a subjective interpretation made through a modern, racialized lens. Furthermore, they point out that there is a complete absence of any other African cultural markers in the Olmec archaeological record. No distinct language, no unique burial customs, no specific metallurgy or domesticated plants from Africa. Without this corroborating evidence, they contend, the theory of an African origin for the Olmec heads remains an intriguing but unsubstantiated hypothesis. The debate over the Olmec heads epitomizes the larger conflict between two competing paradigms of human history. One paradigm views history as a story of linear, isolated development, where each civilization innovated independently within its own geographical and cultural bubble. The other paradigm proposes a more interconnected, quote, 22 model of history, where ideas, technologies, and even people have been traveling the globe for millennia, creating a complex web of shared influences. The evidence from Göbekli Tepe, with its advanced astronomy dating back 12,000 years, lends significant weight to the latter model. It suggests that a high level of scientific knowledge existed at a time when all of humanity was supposedly composed of simple hunter-gatherers, a knowledge that could then have been disseminated globally. The true significance of the quote 23 may therefore lie not just in the celestial maps carved in stone, but in the potential for a unified understanding of our collective past. It forces us to reconsider the capabilities of our ancient ancestors and to question the rigid timelines we have constructed for them. The possibility that survivors of an ancient cataclysm, carrying the seeds of a lost science, journeyed across the oceans to influence the rise of civilizations in the Americas is a powerful and transformative idea. It reframes history not as a series of disconnected events, but as a single, unfolding story with a shared and perhaps forgotten origin. The mystery of transoceanic contact is the bridge that connects the dots, linking the astronomical temples of ancient Turkey with the colossal monuments of Mesoamerica, and urging us to search for the truth hidden in our planet's most enigmatic archaeological sites. Emerging from the dense tropical jungles of Mexico's Gulf Coast, a civilization arose that would profoundly shape the course of an entire continent. The Olmec, flourishing in the lowlands of the modern-day Mexican states of Veracruz and Tabasco, are widely regarded as the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Their influence is so pervasive and foundational that later great societies, including the Maya and the Aztec, built upon the very blueprint the Olmec established. This culture appeared with a sophistication and complexity that has long defied conventional explanations for human development. Archaeological evidence traces their emergence to a period around 1600 BCE, a time when they should have been, by all accounts, a simple society. Yet, what the archaeological record reveals is anything but simple, presenting instead a culture with organized religion, monumental art, and a complex societal structure already in place. The suddenness of their rise, without a clear evolutionary precursor, is the first great mystery they present to the modern world. The heartland of the Olmec world was a challenging environment of swamps, rivers, and dense forests. Yet they mastered it with remarkable ingenuity. Their major ceremonial centers were not randomly placed, but were strategically situated to control trade routes and utilize the region's rich natural resources. The first and earliest of these great urban hubs was San Lorenzo, which reached its zenith between approximately 1200 and 900 BCE. This site was not a city in the modern sense, but a sprawling ceremonial complex built atop an artificial plateau, itself modified by human hands. Archaeologists have discovered sophisticated water management systems, including basalt-lined drains and aqueducts, suggesting a highly organized and centrally directed labor force. The sheer scale of the engineering required to level the hilltop and construct these massive public works points to a powerful ruling elite with the authority to command thousands of workers. Around 900 BCE, the thriving center of San Lorenzo was mysteriously and violently abandoned, its monumental sculptures deliberately defaced and buried in deep ravines. This act was not one of gradual decline, but a sudden, systematic, and concerted effort to erase the center's sacred power. Why the Olmec would undertake such a monumental task of destruction remains a subject of intense scholarly debate, with theories ranging from internal rebellions to a ritualized termination of a sacred site. Following the collapse of San Lorenzo, the seat of Olmec power shifted eastward to a new and even more magnificent site known as La Venta. Flourishing from approximately 900 BCE to 400 BCE, La Venta became the new epicenter of Olmec culture, religion, and art. This site was built on a small island in the middle of the Tonala River, a location that further underscores the Olmec's ability to shape their environment to serve their complex cosmological and social needs. La Venta presents perhaps the most complete and organized expression of Olmec urban planning, centered around a grand ceremonial core aligned to a specific cardinal orientation. At its heart stood the Great Pyramid, a conical mound of earth over 30 meters high, which served as a focal point for ritual and ceremony. Surrounding this pyramid were plazas, platforms, and a treasure trove of the most iconic Olmec art, including the colossal basalt heads and exquisite jade offerings. Archaeologists have also discovered elaborate tombs and caches of precious objects, suggesting that La Venta was not just a ceremonial center, but also the burial place for powerful rulers. The site's layout, with its precise alignments and carefully placed monuments, implies a deep knowledge of astronomy and a complex worldview that integrated the heavens with the earthly realm. The eventual decline and abandonment of La Venta around 400 BCE marked the end of the Olmec's most vibrant and influential period, though their cultural legacy continued to flourish for centuries. The third principal Olmec center is Tres Zapotes, which rose to prominence as La Venta waned, becoming the last bastion of the classic Olmec style. It is here, inscribed on a stone monument, that archaeologists found one of the earliest uses of the long count calendar system, a sophisticated method of tracking time that would later be perfected by the Maya. This discovery is crucial as it demonstrates that the intellectual achievements of the Olmec extended far beyond monumental sculpture into the realms of mathematics and timekeeping. The presence of this calendar at a relatively late Olmec site suggests that the core of their scientific knowledge was developed and disseminated throughout their sphere of influence. These three centers, San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes, form the geographical and chronological backbone of our understanding of the Olmec civilization. They represent the physical anchors of a culture whose influence spread far beyond their immediate heartland, touching countless other Mesoamerican societies. The very name Olmec is a modern invention, taken from the Nahuatl word Olmeca, meaning the rubber people, a reference to the region where the Aztec later found people skilled in extracting latex from rubber trees. We do not know what these ancient people called themselves, as they left behind no written texts in the way the Maya later did. What they did leave behind is a rich and enigmatic artistic and archaeological record that speaks volumes about their beliefs and their way of life. Central to Olmec religion and art is the powerful and recurring motif of the were-jaguar, a supernatural being blending the features of a human infant and a jaguar. This creature, with its almond-shaped eyes, flared nostrils, and distinctive cleft head, is believed to represent a shaman's transformation or a primal deity of rain and fertility. The were-jaguar embodies the Olmec worldview, a cosmology in which the boundaries between the human, animal, and divine realms were fluid and permeable. This shamanistic and animistic worldview is further reflected in the thousands of smaller-scale objects the Olmec created with breathtaking skill and artistic vision. They were master craftsmen, working with the most difficult and precious materials available, most notably jade, a stone harder than steel. Jade was more valuable to the Olmec than gold, its green symbolizing water, maize, life, and fertility, and its acquisition required long-distance trade networks with cultures in the Guatemalan highlands. Archaeologists have uncovered exquisite jade figurines, ceremonial axes known as '28", and pendants depicting humans, gods, and mythical creatures with astonishing anatomical detail and expressive power. One of the most famous examples is a tiny jade statue depicting a figure holding a were-jaguar infant, a profound statement about lineage, divinity, and the transfer of power. These objects were not mere trinkets, but powerful talismans and symbols of elite status, reserved for rulers and shamans. The creation of these monumental and miniature works, the construction of vast ceremonial centers, and the organization of far-reaching trade networks all point to a highly stratified and complex society. At the top of this social pyramid was a class of elite rulers, likely a combination of chiefs and high-ranking priests, who held both political and religious authority. These elites were responsible for coordinating the massive labor projects that defined Olmec civilization. From quarrying and transporting multi-ton basalt blocks to managing the agricultural surplus needed to feed a non-farming population. The primary crop underpinning this economy was maize, which, through selective cultivation, had become the caloric staple of the region. The ability to produce a reliable agricultural surplus was the foundation upon which the entire Olmec edifice was built, freeing a portion of the population to become artisans, engineers, priests, and rulers. The legacy of the Olmec is so deeply embedded in the cultural fabric of Mesoamerica that it can be difficult to untangle their specific contributions from later developments. However, leading scholars identify a core suite of cultural traits, often referred to as an underscore, quote, 29 underscore, that appear first in the Gulf Coast and then spread outward. These include the concept of the Mesoamerican ball game, a ritual sport with deep cosmological significance that was played by nearly all subsequent civilizations. They also pioneered the long count calendar, a system of counting linear time that would become a hallmark of Maya civilization. The use of jade as a symbol of power and divinity, the practice of skull shaping as a mark of elite status, and the pantheon of gods, including the feathered serpent, all have their roots firmly planted in Olmec soil. They provided the cultural, religious, and technological quote 30 quote that ran on the quote 31 quote of Mesoamerica for the next 2,000 years. The fundamental paradox of the Olmec is that they were a foundational culture whose own foundations remained shrouded in profound mystery. They gave writing, calendars, and religion to other societies, yet they appeared with these concepts already highly developed. They built colossal monuments using advanced engineering principles, yet they did so without the wheel, metal tools, or beasts of burden. They established trade networks spanning hundreds of miles, yet they seemingly emerged from a cultural vacuum in the jungles of the Gulf Coast. This paradox forces a re-examination of the linear model of history, suggesting instead that bursts of innovation may be triggered by external influences or forgotten knowledge. The search for the origins of the Olmec genius is therefore a search for the origins of Mesoamerican civilization itself. And it is within their most enduring and controversial creations, their colossal stone heads, that the search for their ultimate genesis finds its most profound and tangible clues. And it is within their most enduring and controversial creations, their colossal stone heads, that the search for their ultimate genesis finds its most profound and tangible clues. Scattered across the Olmec heartland, 17 of these monumental basalt sculptures have been discovered, each one a masterpiece of stone carving that defies easy explanation. Weighing up to 50 tons and standing nearly 3 meters tall, these heads are not mere abstract representations, but startlingly individualized portraits, each with a distinct mood and personality. They were discovered at the principal Olmec centers of San Lorenzo and La Venta, often buried in long lines or arranged in ceremonial groupings. The very existence of these sculptures, created by a culture without metal tools or the wheel, is a testament to an organization and technological capability that seems utterly anomalous for their time. The prevailing archaeological interpretation posits that these heads are idealized portraits of individual Olmec rulers, immortalized in stone to project their power and authority long after their deaths. Each head wears a distinct, elaborate headdress, which many scholars believe represents the protective gear worn during the ritual Mesoamerican ball game, a sport central to Olmec cosmology and political life. The facial features, from the broad, flat noses to the thick, fleshy lips and down-turned mouths, are seen as stylistic representations of the local population, or perhaps the idealized features of a ruling caste. From this perspective, the colossal heads are the ultimate political statements, massive billboards broadcasting the might and divine mandate of the Olmec elite. This theory comfortably places the heads within the known framework of Mesoamerican society, albeit at its most ambitious and sophisticated extreme. Yet, when one moves from artistic interpretation to the harsh realities of logistics, the mainstream explanation begins to strain under the weight of physical impossibilities. The basalt used for the sculptures was not sourced locally. It was quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, a volcanic range located over 80 kilometers from the Olmec site of San Lorenzo. This means the ancient Olmec had to first extract massive, multi-ton boulders from the earth using only stone tools, a feat of incredible labor and precision. They then had to transport these colossal weights across rugged, swampy terrain, likely using a combination of river rafts and immense human effort to pull them overland. The entire operation, from quarry to final placement, would have required the coordinated labor of thousands of individuals, a level of social organization that is staggering for a culture dated to 1500 BCE. The sheer engineering challenge posed by the transport of the heads forces a reconsideration of the capabilities we attribute to these ancient people. To move a 40-ton block of stone without wheels, draft animals, or pulleys is a problem that would tax modern engineers. Experimental archaeology has shown that it is possible using massive logs as rollers and hundreds of laborers pulling on ropes, but this assumes a large, surplus population and a highly centralized command structure. This logistical achievement alone suggests the Olmec were not a simple chiefdom, but a full-fledged state, capable of undertaking public works projects on a scale previously thought impossible for this era. The effort required to create and move just one of these heads would have been a monumental event, a society-wide undertaking that solidified the power of the ruler it depicted. This technological prowess exists in stark contrast to the otherwise simple material culture of the Olmec, creating a significant archaeological paradox. This paradox deepens when one examines the specific and highly detailed physical features of the colossal heads, which have been a source of fierce debate for decades. The unmistakable physical characteristics, broad noses, prominent lips, and a general facial structure that does not resemble typical modern-day indigenous populations of the region, led early researchers to propose extraordinary theories. In the mid-20th century, archaeologist Matthew Stirling, the first to excavate La Venta, noted the, quote, appearance of the heads, an observation that was later picked up by other scholars. This has fueled a persistent, albeit highly controversial, hypothesis that the Olmec, or at least their ruling class, had origins in Africa. The theory suggests that transatlantic voyagers, perhaps from West African civilizations like the Nok or later cultures, may have reached the Americas and influenced the rise of Olmec society. Proponents of this contact theory, such as the late Professor Ivan van Sertima, argue that the heads are not stylized, but are in fact realistic portraits of African people who arrived on the Gulf Coast and became revered as leaders or gods. They point to the similarity of the stone faces to the physiognomy of African populations as evidence that cannot be dismissed as mere artistic convention. Furthermore, they draw parallels between Olmec and African cultural practices, such as the use of ancestor worship and the significance of the elephant, a creature depicted in Olmec art that is not native to the Americas. According to this view, the Olmec civilization was not a purely indigenous development, but a hybrid culture, born from the fusion of local peoples with an advanced African seafaring contingent. This radical theory would, if true, completely rewrite the narrative of human prehistory and global exploration. Mainstream archaeology, however, overwhelmingly rejects the transatlantic contact hypothesis, citing a lack of corroborating evidence like African DNA, non-native plant or animal species, or undisputed African artifacts. Critics argue that interpreting ancient art through a modern lens of racial categories is anachronistic and misleading. They contend that the facial features of the heads are simply an artistic style, a form of physiognomic expression common in Mesoamerican art, which often depicted individuals with a wide range of features. The physical diversity within ancient populations, they suggest, may have been far greater than what is observed today, and the heads may simply represent a local phenotype that has since disappeared. For most scholars, the simplest explanation remains the most plausible. The heads are powerful, stylized portraits of local Olmec kings, created by local Olmec artists. Perhaps the most enigmatic feature of the colossal heads is the intricate headdress each one wears, a detail that has received less attention than the faces, but may hold a crucial key to understanding their purpose. These are not simple caps, but complex, multi-layered constructions, often interpreted as elaborate helmets or ceremonial crowns. The detail is so fine that one can often discern what appears to be stitched leather, animal pelts, or woven mats incorporated into the design. While the ballgame helmet explanation is compelling, some researchers have wondered if these headpieces could represent something more, perhaps a symbol of a specific lineage, a geographical origin, or a rank within a shamanic order. The uniqueness of each headdress, like the uniqueness of each face, suggests that they were not generic symbols, but specific identifiers, encoding information about the individual ruler. Could these headdresses be a form of, quote, 33, a visual record of a forgotten heritage? Adding another layer to the mystery is the deliberate manner in which many of the heads were buried and often mutilated before their interment. At San Lorenzo, most of the heads were found in ceremonial ravines, having been ritually, quote, 34, quote, before being deposited, a practice common for sacred Mesoamerican objects to release their spirit. At La Venta, several heads were part of a complex offering, buried beneath a mosaic floor and arranged in a specific pattern. Why would a civilization go to such incredible lengths to create these monuments, only to hide them from the world shortly thereafter? Some believe the burials were a response to the death of the ruler depicted, or a shift in dynastic power. Others propose a more esoteric reason. Perhaps the heads were not just monuments, but anchors of spiritual power, placed in the earth to sanctify the ground, or to communicate with the underworld in ways we can no longer comprehend. The saga of the Olmec heads mirrors the architectural enigma of Göbekli Tepe in its defiance of conventional historical timelines. Both represent a sudden, inexplicable burst of technological and artistic sophistication emerging from cultures presumed to be simple and underdeveloped. Hunter-gatherers in Anatolia somehow carved and erected megalithic pillars with advanced astronomical knowledge, while the Olmec, without metal tools, engineered and moved 50-ton stone portraits across vast distances. This parallel suggests a pattern, a recurring anomaly in the human story, where monumental achievements appear out of context. It forces us to question whether our linear model of gradual human progress is fundamentally flawed, missing periods of rapid, perhaps externally influenced innovation. The Olmec heads, like the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, stand as silent sentinels, challenging the very foundations of our accepted past. The quote 35 of the Olmec civilization itself is a historical puzzle that these colossal heads only deepen. Around 1500 BCE, a complex society with organized religion, sophisticated art, and advanced engineering seemingly materialized in the jungles of the Gulf Coast, fully formed. There are no clear, undisputed precursors to the Olmec, no gradual developmental phases visible in the archaeological record that would explain how they acquired their immense knowledge. They did not experiment with sculpture. They produced masterpieces from the very beginning. They did not dabble in social organization. They immediately constructed massive ceremonial centers that required a highly stratified and powerful state apparatus. This civilizational quote 36 is one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient Americas, and the colossal heads are its most potent symbol. Could it be that these heads are more than just portraits of kings, that they are actually part of a larger, more complex message left for posterity? Some independent researchers have begun to explore the possibility that the arrangement of the heads at sites like La Venta was not random, but followed a specific, intentional pattern. They theorize that the heads, along with other significant monuments, might form a terrestrial map, mirroring constellations or significant celestial events. This would elevate the Olmec from mere skilled artisans to master astronomers, encoding their cosmological understanding into the very landscape. The individual features of each head could even represent symbolic attributes associated with specific stars or star groups. This line of inquiry transforms the heads from political propaganda into a scientific document, a quote 37 of an ancient star knowledge. This potential connection to the stars provides a tantalizing bridge back to Göbekli Tepe and its proposed celestial map, suggesting a shared global blueprint of knowledge. If two isolated ancient civilizations on different continents both encoded astronomical data into monumental stone, the implication is staggering. It points not to a coincidence, but to a shared source of information, a legacy of a lost global civilization, or a common teacher from beyond our world. The Olmec heads would then be the American equivalent of the Göbekli Tepe pillars, fulfilling the same function in a different cultural and artistic idiom. This theory remains on the fringes of academia, but it provides a powerful explanatory framework for the most difficult questions surrounding the Olmec. Their impossible engineering, sudden appearance, and enigmatic art could all be facets of this inherited sacred knowledge. The search for this blueprint, for the connection that binds the old and new worlds, now leads us to search the skies above the Olmec heartland, seeking a zodiac hidden in the stone faces of their kings. The search for a zodiac within the Olmec heartland leads researchers directly to the sprawling ceremonial center of La Venta, a site meticulously arranged around a central clay pyramid. According to several independent investigators, the precise positioning of the colossal heads, altars, and stone stelae across this complex is not random, but forms a terrestrial reflection of the heavens. They propose a direct correlation between the layout of key monuments and the patterns of specific constellations, most notably Orion, a celestial figure revered across numerous ancient cultures for its hunter-like form. The theory suggests that the Olmec priests, acting as master astronomers, transplanted the order of the cosmos onto the Earth, creating a living map of the night sky. This intentional placement would have transformed La Venta into a giant astronomical instrument, used for observation, ritual, and the encoding of sacred knowledge. The Great Pyramid of La Venta itself, a conical mound of earth standing 30 meters tall, becomes a pivotal point in this celestial alignment, potentially representing a central star or the axis mundi connecting the earth to the sky. Surrounding this pyramid, the offerings of jade, serpentine, and the famous mosaic pavements depicting abstract, quote, 38, quote, faces may serve as symbolic markers for other celestial bodies or nebulae. The arrangement of the four colossal heads found at La Venta, buried in a linear formation, has been interpreted by some theorists as representing the four cardinal points or the four pillars holding up the sky. This deliberate organization implies a worldview where architecture, religion, and astronomy were inseparable, a unified system of understanding the universe. Each stone placement becomes a deliberate act of cosmic inscription, a sentence in a grand celestial story written in basalt. Further evidence for this astronomical worldview is found not in the arrangement of stones, but in the recurring motifs of Olmec art itself, particularly the enigmatic were-jaguar. This hybrid creature, blending human and feline features, is a dominant theme, appearing on countless artifacts, from tiny jade axes to massive altars. Mainstream scholarship interprets the were-jaguar as a shamanic figure, a symbol of rain and fertility, or a representation of a ruling lineage's mystical power. However, an alternative interpretation links this figure directly to the heavens, proposing it represents a specific, powerful constellation known to the Olmec. Some researchers have pointed to the possibility of a Mesoamerican version of Scorpio, a celestial scorpion or dragon, which would fit the creature's powerful, clawed, and monstrous imagery. The were-jaguar would then be a god-king of the night sky, a guardian of the cosmic order. The strongest, most tangible evidence for Olmec astronomical prowess, however, lies in the mathematical legacy they passed on to their successors, the long count calendar. This system, which appears fully formed in the archaeological record, is capable of tracking time over vast periods, millions of years into the past and future. Its very foundation is astronomical, based on the precise movements of the sun, the moon, and the highly visible cycles of the planet Venus, which was revered as a celestial deity. Developing such a sophisticated calendrical system requires centuries of meticulous night sky observation and advanced mathematical understanding, far beyond what is typically associated with a quote culture. The existence of this calendar proves that the Olmec were not just casual stargazers, but dedicated scientists of the cosmos. They possessed the knowledge and the motivation to chart the heavens with incredible accuracy. This focus on Venus is a critical link, as the synodic cycle of the planet, 584 days, was a fundamental unit of time for later Mesoamerican peoples like the Maya and Aztecs. The Olmec are believed to be the originators of this Venusian cult, tracking the planet's appearance as both the morning star and the evening star. This dual nature made Venus a symbol of death and rebirth, a celestial process that mirrored the agricultural and human life cycles. The intricate carvings on Olmec monuments, once dismissed as purely mythical, may in fact be complex almanacs, recording the heliacal rising of Venus or its conjunction with other planets. The celestial dragon motif, so common in later Mesoamerican art, may have its origins in Olmec observations of Venus's path through the sky. This deep-rooted astronomical tradition provides the intellectual framework for a more complex system of star mapping. Beyond the calendar, the very orientation of Olmec ceremonial centers suggests a deliberate alignment with celestial events. At the site of San Lorenzo, the primary plateau appears to be oriented on an axis that aligns with the setting sun on significant dates of the year, possibly the summer solstice. While the evidence is sometimes debated due to the erosion and degradation of the sites over millennia, the pattern is consistent with what is found in virtually all subsequent Mesoamerican cities. The act of orienting a sacred space to the movements of the sun is a foundational principle of archaeoastronomy, embedding the site within the rhythms of the cosmos. This practice demonstrates that the Olmec understood and revered the solar cycle, integrating it into the very fabric of their most important locations. Their world was built in harmony with the heavens, not in opposition to it. Returning to the enigmatic headdresses of the colossal heads, one can now view them through a new astronomical lens. The intricate geometric patterns, the repeated motifs, and the layered construction could be more than just symbols of rank or depictions of ceremonial regalia. Some theorists have suggested these complex designs are stylized representations of celestial charts, with specific patterns corresponding to star clusters or the movements of constellations. A circular element on a headdress could represent the sun, while a series of dots might signify the Pleiades, a cluster of stars immensely important in Mesoamerican cosmology. Each unique headdress could therefore be a personal quote 40 of the ruler it depicts, linking his earthly authority to his celestial destiny. This interpretation elevates the heads from political portraits to astronomical documents. It is crucial, however, to present the counterbalance from mainstream academia, which remains highly skeptical of these astronomical interpretations. The overwhelming consensus among established archaeologists is that there is no definitive, direct evidence proving the Olmec used a complex zodiac or created terrestrial star maps. Critics argue that these theories are based on subjective pattern recognition, a phenomenon known as pareidolia, where one sees meaningful images in random data. They contend that the similarities between site layouts and constellations are coincidental, and that connecting the Were-Jaguar to Scorpio is speculative at best. For traditional scholars, the evidence for Olmec astronomy rests firmly on the calendar and solar alignments, not on deciphering hidden star charts in their art. The burden of proof, they maintain, has not been met. Despite this skepticism, the sheer volume of circumstantial evidence encourages a deeper investigation into the Olmec cosmovision. Their art is saturated with celestial symbolism, from representations of eagles and vultures, birds associated with the sun and the upper world, to jaguars, creatures of the night and the underworld. The very concept of the world tree, or axis mundi, a central pillar in their belief system, represents the connection between the earthly realm, the underworld below, and the heavens above. This tripartite cosmology is inherently astronomical, placing humanity at the center of a layered universe governed by celestial forces. Every religious ritual, every artistic creation, can be seen as an attempt to navigate and maintain balance within this cosmic structure. This brings the narrative full circle, back to the pillars of Göbekli Tepe and its own proposed star map, particularly the so-called vulture stone, which some interpret as a record of the torrid meteor stream and a great cataclysm. The parallels are striking. Two of the oldest monumental civilizations on Earth, separated by an ocean, both using massive stone structures to encode what appears to be sophisticated astronomical data. Both cultures emerged with this knowledge already fully formed, without a clear developmental period of trial and error. Both placed an immense importance on the sky, creating complex mythologies and artistic systems centered on celestial events. This cannot be dismissed as a simple coincidence. It suggests a pattern, a shared template. Could this template be the, quote, 41 alluded to throughout this investigation? A legacy of knowledge passed down from a lost, advanced global civilization? The theory proposes that a shared source, whether a forgotten antediluvian culture or even visitors from beyond our world, provided a core set of astronomical and engineering principles to disparate groups of people around the globe. The Olmec and the builders of Göbekli Tepe would then be inheritors of this ancient wisdom, adapting it to their local environments and cultures. The zodiac, whether carved into a Turkish pillar or arranged in a Mexican jungle, would be the key to unlocking this shared heritage. It is a language written in stone, a universal message awaiting a decipherment that our modern science is only now beginning to attempt. If this blueprint was real, why would it be encoded in such an enigmatic and permanent way, hidden in plain sight? Perhaps the knowledge was considered too sacred or too powerful for the common person, reserved for a priestly or kingly elite who were tasked with maintaining cosmic order. Or, more ominously, perhaps the creators of these monuments feared a future cataclysm, much like the one potentially depicted at Göbekli Tepe, and sought to preserve their vital knowledge for posterity. Stone is eternal. It can survive the collapse of civilizations and the loss of written languages. By inscribing their star charts into massive, immovable monoliths, they ensured that the blueprint would endure, a silent testament to a forgotten truth waiting to be rediscovered. The true purpose of the Olmec zodiac, then, may have been multifunctional: a scientific record, a ritual space, a pedagogical tool for initiates, and a time capsule for a distant future. The colossal heads were not just kings, but celestial anchors, their gazes fixed on the heavens as much as on their earthly subjects. The Olmec were not simply carving stone, they were building a cosmos on Earth, a mirror of the divine order they observed in the night sky. Their entire civilization was an act of astronomical reverence, from the calendars that governed their lives to the monuments that defined their sacred spaces. The evidence, while still fragmentary and debated, points to a level of intellectual achievement that challenges our foundational understanding of the past. We are left with a profound and unsettling implication: that human history has not been a linear progression from simple to complex, but a cyclical process of rise and fall, of gaining and losing monumental knowledge. The Olmec and Göbekli Tepe are echoes of a forgotten chapter, a preview of an intellectual sophistication that we are only now reclaiming. The blueprints they left behind, etched in stone and scattered across the globe, are the clues to this lost history. The search for the Olmec zodiac is not just about understanding a single ancient civilization. It is about re-evaluating the entire human story. As we prepare to synthesize these global connections, the pieces of a vast, forgotten puzzle begin to align, hinting at a single, coherent picture of our shared celestial origins. The synthesis begins by placing the monumental architectures of Göbekli Tepe, the Olmec heartland of San Lorenzo, and the Giza Plateau on a single, unified map, not of the Earth, but of the heavens. The central pillar of Göbekli Tepe's enclosure D, with its carved arms and hands, may represent a figure pointing to a celestial region, a concept mirrored in the gaze of the colossal Olmec heads and the sightline of the Great Sphinx. Researchers propose that these three distant points, anchored in stone, are terrestrial markers for a shared celestial template, a cosmic trinity encoded by a forgotten intelligence. The sheer improbability of three separate contemporary cultures at the dawn of their civilizations, independently developing such sophisticated and parallel systems, is the primary engine driving this theory. This blueprint, it seems, was not a local invention, but a global inheritance. The most compelling evidence for this blueprint lies in the proposed correlation to the constellation of Orion, a pattern that is almost universally recognizable across the night sky. In Egypt, the three Great Pyramids of Giza are famously argued by some researchers to be a terrestrial map of Orion's belt, with the Nile River representing the Milky Way. Thousands of miles away, in the Valley of Mexico, the layout of the primary pyramids at Teotihuacan, a culture heavily influenced by Olmec predecessors, also reflects this distinctive three-star pattern. At Göbekli Tepe, Pillar 18, with its three niches or animal symbols carved in a row, has been interpreted as a much earlier, more abstract representation of the same stellar configuration, establishing a continuous thread of astronomical observation that predates the others by millennia. Moving to another region of the sky, the so-called vulture stone at Göbekli Tepe appears to document a catastrophic event originating from the torrid meteor stream, with its imagery depicting vultures, scorpions, and a headless man, all symbols potentially linked to specific constellations like Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. This celestial drama, focused on the zodiac sign of Taurus, may form the basis of a shared mythological memory. In Mesoamerica, the Olmec and their descendants held the Pleiades, a star cluster within Taurus, in supreme reverence, scheduling their agricultural cycles and ritual calendar by its heliacal rising. The convergence on this specific and powerful region of the sky, one associated with both creation and destruction, suggests a common source of observational knowledge passed down through generations. Beyond the celestial alignments, the blueprint also encompasses the impossible engineering feats required to construct these monuments, suggesting a shared technological package. The builders of Göbekli Tepe quarried, shaped, and erected 10 to 20-ton T-shaped pillars using what should have been primitive Stone Age technology, a feat that still challenges modern engineers. The Olmec transported massive basalt boulders, weighing dozens of tons, from quarries over 60 miles away through dense jungle swamps, without the benefit of the wheel or beasts of burden. Similarly, the precision cutting and placement of the 2 million-plus limestone blocks in the Great Pyramid of Giza remain a subject of intense debate, with some pointing to a level of mathematical and mechanical prowess that seems to appear out of nowhere. A critical piece of this shared knowledge appears to be an understanding of the precession of the equinoxes, the slow 26,000-year wobble of the Earth's axis that causes the position of the stars to shift over vast periods. The vulture stone at Göbekli Tepe, with its animal symbols corresponding to specific constellations, is interpreted by some as a snapshot of the sky at a particular date, around 9600 BCE, memorializing a time of great upheaval. In Mesoamerica, the long count calendar, established by the Olmec successors, is a vast linear chronology that may have been calibrated to track this slow celestial drift, anchoring their mythology to an even more ancient epic. This is not simple astronomy. This is deep time cosmology, a sophisticated science that should not exist in cultures traditionally deemed nascent. Mainstream archaeology, however, presents a powerful dissenting voice, arguing that these connections are the result of pareidolia and selective interpretation rather than empirical evidence. The consensus view holds that human cultures, facing similar celestial phenomena, will naturally develop similar myths and alignments in a process known as convergent evolution. Skeptics contend that the Orion correlation theory, for instance, relies on forcing a map to fit the monuments by selectively choosing which pyramids to include and ignoring others that do not align. They argue that the burden of proof remains on those proposing a lost global civilization, and that until a definitive, unambiguous artifact is found, these theories remain in the realm of speculative pseudoscience. Proponents of the blueprint theory counter this skepticism by pointing to the sheer volume and specificity of the coincidences, arguing that the law of probabilities eventually turns coincidence into compelling evidence. It is not just one alignment or one shared symbol, but a complex web of astronomical correlations, engineering parallels, and mythological archetypes spanning the globe. The central mystery that mainstream academia struggles to explain is the lack of a visible developmental curve. This knowledge appears fully formed at the earliest stages of these civilizations. The absence of trial and error, of simpler prototypes leading to these masterpieces, is the most damning piece of evidence against the idea of independent, spontaneous invention. This shared template may extend to the very symbolism employed by these cultures, suggesting a common cosmological language. The vulture, a prominent figure at Göbekli Tepe, is a bird associated with death and rebirth, a scavenger that cleanses the world, a motif found in many ancient mythologies. The jaguar, the supreme symbol of the Olmec, represents the power of the night, the earth, and the underworld, a concept not dissimilar to the Sphinx's role as a guardian of the necropolis. These are not mere artistic choices. They are archetypes, potent symbols that may represent specific celestial bodies, constellations, or cosmic principles within a universally understood system of thought. Perhaps the ultimate proof of a shared blueprint would lie in the discovery of a unique and non-obvious mathematical or geometric constant embedded within all these sites. For instance, if a specific angle of construction, a ratio of dimensions, or a precise pi-based calculation was found to be identical at Göbekli Tepe, the Great Pyramid, and Levanta, the case for a common source would become almost irrefutable. Such a constant, unrelated to simple architectural necessities, would serve as a, quote, 42 of the original architects. This is the smoking gun that researchers continue to search for, a single piece of data that could bridge the gap between theory and accepted history. The search for this evidence inevitably expands the map further, drawing in other ancient sites with inexplicable astronomical alignments. The megalithic circles of Stonehenge in England, with its sophisticated solstitial calendar, and the submerged structures near Yonaguni Island in Japan, with their peculiar terraced formations, are often brought into the discussion as potential waypoints on this global blueprint. Each new site, each anomalous artifact, adds another data point to the grand pattern, reinforcing the idea that we are looking at the scattered fragments of a once unified global science. The blueprint was not limited to one continent. It was a worldwide phenomenon. The common thread driving the creation and preservation of this celestial blueprint may have been a shared collective memory of a global cataclysm, the very event possibly depicted on the vulture stone. The meteor stream that bombarded the Earth at the end of the last ice age could have destroyed a previous advanced civilization, leaving behind a small number of survivors. These survivors, the quote 43, would then travel the world, imparting their core knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering to the indigenous peoples they encountered, ensuring that humanity would be prepared for the next cyclical disaster. In this context, the star maps are not mere academic exercises, but are profound survival tools, designed to track the long cycles of celestial threats. The massive, durable stone of these monuments was chosen specifically to withstand the ravages of time and the collapse of societies, serving as a permanent warning for future generations. The blueprint is therefore a message in a bottle, a testament to a forgotten history and a guide for a precarious future. It reveals that the ancients were not just looking to the heavens for prophecy, but for a practical understanding of a cyclical and often violent cosmos. The matching of these global star maps is the final piece of the puzzle, transforming a series of incredible coincidences into a coherent, albeit radical, new paradigm of human history. The patterns are too specific, the engineering too advanced, and the knowledge too sophisticated to be easily dismissed as the products of isolated, primitive societies. The blueprint revealed is one of a shared celestial heritage, a legacy from a lost epoch of human achievement that forces us to question everything we thought we knew about our own origins. We are not the first to gaze upon the stars with intellectual wonder, and the stones they left behind are the proof. The proof etched in stone demands a radical revision of the human story, a paradigm shift of monumental proportions that dismantles the long-held belief in linear, isolated progress. Our history textbooks would need to be rewritten, moving from a simple narrative of primitive hunter-gatherers slowly discovering agriculture and civilization to a far more complex and dramatic tale of rise, fall, and rebirth. This is not merely an adjustment to a few dates. It is a complete overhaul of our understanding of who we are and where we came from. The implications suggest that the great civilizations of Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley were not the brilliant, spontaneous beginnings of urban life, but rather the later chapters in a story that began much earlier. They were the Renaissance, not the genesis, of human high culture, rebuilding upon the scattered foundations of a forgotten, global predecessor. The implications force us to reconsider the identity of these mysterious architects, this hypothesized progenitor culture that possessed a sophisticated grasp of cosmology and engineering. Were they a centralized global political entity, a kind of Neolithic world government that spanned continents? Or were they a more decentralized network of knowledge keepers, like an ancient scientific guild? Perhaps they were a maritime civilization, whose coast-hugging vessels were the primary method for transmitting this sacred blueprint across the vast oceans of a world with lower sea levels. The very nature of their society remains one of the greatest mysteries, a ghost in the machine of prehistory that we can only infer from the powerful echoes they left behind. Theirs was a world without cities of metal, yet one that achieved intellectual feats we are only just now beginning to comprehend. This lost civilization's mastery was not necessarily in what we would recognize as modern technology, such as electronics or advanced metallurgy, but in a profound understanding of fundamental physics, geometry, and astronomy. Their ability to precisely shape and transport megalithic stones, some weighing over 100 tons, points to a knowledge of leverage, vibration, and resonance that has been lost to time. They could map the stars with an accuracy that suggests centuries, if not millennia, of sustained observation, tracking celestial cycles so vast they dwarf a single human lifetime. This was not a power over nature technology, but a technology in harmony with nature, a subtle but potent science that allowed them to manipulate the physical world in ways that seem impossible to us today. Their greatest tool was not the crane or the lathe, but the human mind coupled with a deep cosmic understanding. The most compelling and chilling implication is that this advanced culture was likely wiped out by a catastrophe of unimaginable scale, an event seared into the memory of the survivors. Modern geological and climatological evidence points directly to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a period around 12,800 years ago when a fragmented comet struck the Earth. This event would have triggered global firestorms, a massive plume of soot that blotted out the sun, and a rapid, catastrophic return to Ice Age conditions that lasted for over 1,000 years. The vulture stone at Göbekli Tepe, with its symbols of a dying swan and serpents, may be a direct, stone-carved record of this very apocalypse, a celestial warning preserved for posterity. The builders of these monuments were not just celebrating the heavens. They were memorializing a time when the heavens turned destructive. Building in stone was therefore not an act of worship, but an act of desperate preservation, a final, defiant stand against the erasure of knowledge. The sites at Göbekli Tepe, Giza, and elsewhere are not merely temples, they are time capsules, libraries of celestial data and engineering principles encoded in a medium designed to last for millennia. The decision to backfill Göbekli Tepe, deliberately burying its entire complex, suddenly makes tragic sense. They were not closing a site, but sealing a vault, protecting its precious information from the chaotic world that followed the cataclysm. The blueprint was their most valuable legacy, the one thing they felt compelled to save for a future humanity that might one day be ready to receive it. These monuments are the oldest and most important message in a bottle the world has ever known. This new paradigm reframes the role of our ancestors following this great disaster, elevating them from simple primitives to the inheritors and curators of a sacred scientific trust. The hunter-gatherers who built Göbekli Tepe were not inventing a new religion from scratch, but rather attempting to reconstruct and preserve the fragments of a cosmic science passed down from a shattered world. Their intricate carvings and precise alignments were the work of a people struggling to remember, to maintain a connection to a golden age they had lost. The subsequent flourishing of agriculture and urbanization may not have been an invention, but a necessary consequence of settling down to fully study, understand, and teach the complex knowledge contained within the blueprint. Civilization in this context was born from the need to act as a living memory bank for a lost epic. Perhaps the most significant implication, and the reason for such vehement academic opposition, is the challenge this theory poses to the very foundation of historical and archaeological science. To accept this blueprint is to accept that a century of mainstream interpretation has been fundamentally flawed, built on an incomplete and inaccurate model of the past. It questions the entire professional structure, from the funding of research to the tenured positions held by those who have built their careers on the old paradigm. The resistance is therefore not just about a difference of opinion on evidence. It is a deeply human resistance to a revolution that threatens to invalidate lifetimes of work. This is a classic case of paradigm paralysis, where the existing scientific framework is incapable of accommodating a new, contradictory reality, no matter how compelling the evidence may be. If such a civilization existed, the question of its geographical heartland, its primary center of innovation, becomes the ultimate archaeological prize. Was it located on a now submerged continental shelf, like the fabled Sundaland in Southeast Asia, or the landmass beneath the Persian Gulf, areas that were above water during the last ice age? The theory would explain why no primary mother city has ever been found. It is likely buried under hundreds of feet of ocean, lost to a cataclysmic rise in sea levels that accompanied the melting of the ice sheets. The search for this cradle of the lost civilization would shift from dry land to marine archaeology, a far more challenging and expensive frontier. The true origins of this global science may lie waiting in the deep, a silent testament to the world that was. This theory provides a tangible, scientific basis for the ubiquity of flood myths found across nearly every culture on Earth, from the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the stories of Manu in India and Noah in the Abrahamic traditions. For centuries, these tales were dismissed as mere allegory or religious fantasy. Yet the discovery of a potential global cataclysm at the end of the last ice age reframes them entirely. They become not myths but memories, distorted and embellished through generations of oral transmission, but rooted in a real historical event that decimated the world of their ancestors. The survivors of this great flood, who carried the blueprint, would have become the legendary culture bringers, the civilizing gods and wise men described in these ancient texts. The blueprint is the key that unlocks the literal truth hidden within our deepest myths. Did the transfer of this blueprint happen in a single, post-cataclysmic wave, as survivors scattered across the globe? Or was there a prolonged period of contact and instruction from a surviving elite? The evidence suggests a possibility of the latter, a long, archaic period where a priesthood or a class of technologists traveled the world, seeding the knowledge in disparate locations. This could explain the similarities in the early stages of different civilizations, a shared foundational knowledge that later diverged and developed its own unique cultural expressions. These ancient ambassadors would have been seen as miracle workers, their knowledge of astronomy and engineering indistinguishable from magic to the local populations they instructed. They were the first globalists, uniting the world not with conquest, but with a shared, sacred science. The implication for archaeology is that we must begin re-examining every ancient site and anomalous artifact through this new lens. Objects previously dismissed as out-of-place artifacts, or ooparts, may suddenly find a context within this global framework. The precise geometry of the stone spheres of Costa Rica, the sophisticated astronomical alignments of Nabta Playa in Egypt, and the advanced metallurgy of ancient Damascus steel may all be local expressions of this inherited, universal knowledge. We have been looking at these mysteries in isolation, trying to explain each one as a unique local development. The blueprint theory urges us to connect the dots, to see the individual threads as part of a single, magnificent tapestry of a lost global heritage. Accepting this history would fundamentally alter our perception of human potential and our relationship to the cycles of nature and time. It would prove that high intelligence and scientific achievement are not a recent invention, but are an inherent human capability, one that can flourish and be utterly lost. It is a humbling realization, suggesting that our current technological civilization is not the pinnacle of human achievement, but merely the latest iteration, vulnerable to the same cosmic and geological forces that destroyed its predecessor. Our story is not one of inevitable ascent, but of cyclical struggle against the immense and often indifferent power of the cosmos. We are part of a much larger, grander, and more tragic drama than we ever imagined. The ultimate implication, however, is not about the past, but about our future. For the blueprint may be more than just a historical record. It may be a warning. The very cataclysm that destroyed the progenitor civilization, a cometary impact, is a recognized threat to our own world today. The advanced astronomy of the ancients was not simply for tracking seasons or navigating seas. It was for tracking the long-term cycles of celestial bodies that pose an existential threat. By mapping the stars and encoding this knowledge in stone, they were sending a message across millennia. Look up, pay attention, and be prepared for the dangers that come from the heavens. The blueprint is a permanent, stone-carved alert system, a warning system we are only now beginning to understand how to read. The final implication is that we are not just the descendants of a lost civilization. We may also be its intended audience. The final implication is that we are not just the descendants of a lost civilization. We may also be its intended audience. This profound realization transforms our quest for the past into a mission for the future, a direct call to action we are now obligated to answer. To be the audience means we must learn to interpret the performance, to understand the complex language of astronomy and engineering left for us in stone. The search for new evidence is no longer an academic exercise, but a vital conversation with our deepest ancestors, a dialogue across 12,000 years of silence. Our next steps will determine whether we simply remain curious spectators of history or become active participants in completing its grandest narrative. The most promising frontier for this future quest lies not on dry land, but deep beneath the waves of the world's oceans. During the last ice age, sea levels were over 120 meters lower than they are today, exposing vast coastal plains that were prime real estate for any advanced civilization. These submerged lands, now forgotten, include the Sunda Shelf in Southeast Asia, the rich area beneath the Persian Gulf, and extensive parts of the coast of India. According to marine geologists, these regions were the most habitable and fertile zones on the planet for millennia before the Great Melt. It is here, buried under layers of silt and seawater, that we may find the primary mother city of the blueprint, the cradle of the global science that was so tragically lost. Exploring these sunken worlds requires a technological leap, pushing the boundaries of marine archaeology into a new era of discovery. Advanced multi-beam sonar systems can now create detailed three-dimensional maps of the ocean floor with incredible resolution, revealing artificial structures that were previously invisible. Autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, equipped with high-definition cameras and magnetometers, can methodically survey these vast plains for weeks at a time. These robotic explorers are our new eyes and ears in the abyss, capable of withstanding the immense pressure and darkness that guard these ancient secrets. The investment required is immense, but the potential reward, a direct glimpse into the antediluvian world, is unparalleled. Parallel to these underwater expeditions, a terrestrial revolution is underway, using a technology called light detection and ranging, or LIDAR. By firing millions of laser pulses from aircraft, scientists can strip away dense jungle canopies and vegetation to reveal the topography of the ground beneath with startling clarity. This technology has already uncovered vast, previously unknown cityscapes in the Guatemalan jungle connected to the Maya, suggesting far larger populations than ever imagined. Applying this same technology to coastlines around the globe could reveal settlements and structures built when the shore was many kilometers further out. LiDAR offers a chance to find the Ice Age ports and harbors from which the bearers of the blueprint may have launched their global expeditions. Beyond searching for new sites, the future quest demands a radical re-examination of the ancient wonders we already believe we understand. Places like the Great Pyramids of Giza, the megalithic stones of Baalbek in Lebanon, and the enigmatic ruins of Tiwanaku in Bolivia must be revisited with an open mind. For decades, archaeology has sought to explain these sites as the product of local independent development, struggling to fit their advanced features into a linear timeline of progress. What if we were to analyze their foundational layers, their earliest astronomical alignments, and their most ancient carvings not as isolated achievements, but as local implementations of a shared, inherited knowledge system? The answers we seek may have been hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to ask the right questions. Another promising avenue lies deep within our own biology, in the field of paleogenomics, or the study of ancient DNA. By analyzing the genetic material of extremely ancient skeletal remains from disparate parts of the world, scientists are painting a surprisingly complex picture of early human migration. Recent studies have uncovered evidence of ghost populations, unknown groups of ancient humans who interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, but have no modern descendants we can easily identify. Could one of these ghost lineages be the genetic footprint of the lost global civilization? A class of elite navigators and scientists who traveled the world seeding knowledge. A global database of a DNA, meticulously correlated with archaeological and astronomical data, could reveal a hidden pattern of shared ancestry that defies conventional historical models. The decipherment of a potential universal script presents one of the most formidable yet thrilling challenges on this future quest. The symbols carved into the pillars at Göbekli Tepe, the undeciphered script of the Indus Valley civilization, and the proto-writing of the Olmecs have all resisted translation for over a century. What if linguists and cryptographers have been approaching them as separate languages, when they are in fact different dialects of a single archaic system of communication? This symbolic language would likely not be phonetic but conceptual, a system of astronomical and mathematical notation designed to be universally understood, transcending local spoken tongues. Cracking this code would be the equivalent of discovering the Rosetta Stone for a lost global science, unlocking the true meaning of the blueprint. Fulfilling this monumental quest will require a level of interdisciplinary collaboration that is unprecedented in the history of science. No single archaeologist, astronomer, or geologist can solve this puzzle alone. The future of this research lies in creating global, open-access platforms where specialists from dozens of fields can contribute their data and expertise. Mythologists must work with astrophysicists to cross-reference ancient legends with cometary impact models, while structural engineers collaborate with historians to analyze the construction techniques of megalithic sites. Only by weaving together these disparate threads of knowledge can we hope to see the complete picture, transforming a collection of mysteries into a single, coherent history. This collaborative approach extends to the public, as the rise of citizen science offers a powerful new tool in the search for evidence. Millions of people around the world are fascinated by these ancient mysteries, and their collective power to analyze data should not be underestimated. High-resolution satellite imagery, LiDAR data, and photographs from museum collections can be made available online, allowing enthusiastic amateurs to scan for anomalies and patterns that might be missed by overworked professionals. By crowdsourcing the initial analysis, the scientific community can prioritize sites and data for further, more rigorous investigation, engaging the entire human species in the search for its own lost origins. This is a story that belongs to everyone, and everyone can be a part of telling it. A key strategy for the future will be the development of what some researchers are calling predictive archaeology. If the blueprint theory is correct, and ancient sites are not random, but are purposefully positioned according to a global star map, then we should be able to predict where other sites are located. By using the established coordinates of Göbekli Tepe and the Olmec Heartland as anchor points, researchers could create a computer model to project the rest of the celestial pattern onto the globe. This would generate a list of specific geographic coordinates where other, as yet undiscovered sites should exist, based on their correlation with specific stars or constellations. Instead of waiting for accidental discoveries, archaeologists could be given a literal treasure map, a scientific hypothesis that guides them directly to the next piece of the puzzle. Of course, the pursuit of such a paradigm-shifting theory is fraught with profound ethical and philosophical considerations. The discovery of a single, mother culture for all subsequent civilizations could easily be twisted to support dangerous ideologies of cultural or racial supremacy. It is therefore imperative that this research be framed from the outset as the story of a shared human heritage, a testament to our collective ingenuity and resilience, not a tool for division. The blueprint, if it exists, belongs to all of humanity as a species, and its message is one of unity, not hierarchy. The guardians of this knowledge must be as wise in their ethics as the ancient architects were in their astronomy. Ultimately, this future quest is about more than just finding ruins and decoding artifacts. It is about reclaiming a lost dimension of the human experience. Our modern society is often characterized by a sense of disconnection from the past, from the cosmos, and from the deeper cycles of nature. The blueprint theory, if proven, would restore that connection, reinstilling a sense of awe and humility in our view of history and our place within it. It would force us to acknowledge that progress is not linear and that our current technological dominance is not guaranteed. To understand the rise and fall of a previous global civilization is to gain crucial perspective on the challenges and vulnerabilities of our own. What if the blueprint is not just a record of what was, but a set of instructions for what we must become? The final and perhaps most important quest is to determine if the astronomical knowledge encoded at these sites was purely observational, or if it contained a deeper philosophical or spiritual component. Did these ancient star mappers understand the universe not just as a physical mechanism, but as a living, conscious entity? The alignment of their sacred sites with celestial events suggests a worldview in which humanity was inextricably linked to the cosmos, a relationship of profound significance. Deciphering this lost cosmology could provide the wisdom and perspective we so desperately need to navigate the existential challenges of the 21st century. The path forward will require courage, funding, and a radical willingness on the part of the academic establishment to question its most fundamental assumptions. It will mean funding expensive deep-sea expeditions instead of yet another dig at a well-known Roman villa. It means giving serious consideration to theories that have long been relegated to the fringes, evaluating them on their evidentiary merit rather than on their conformity to dogma. This is a call to a new generation of explorers, not of empty continents, but of empty spaces in our historical understanding, armed with advanced technology and a willingness to see the world with new eyes. The blueprint has been found. Now the work of truly understanding it must begin. The final quest, therefore, is an inward one as much as it is an outward one. We are searching not just for a lost civilization, but for a lost part of ourselves. The message in stone may be a warning about cometary impacts and cataclysms, but it is also a testament to the incredible heights the human mind can achieve. To find these survivors is to honor their struggle and their sacrifice, to acknowledge that we are the inheritors of a legacy far older and grander than we have ever dared to dream. The blueprint is a mirror, and in its reflection, we may finally see who we are, where we come from, and the magnificent, terrible, and awe-inspiring cosmic drama of which we are all a part.